Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Dina Zaman. I'm from IMAN RESEARCH. I'm one of the founders, and we're a small little research group in Malaysia studying socio-political trends, society, beliefs, perception. And one of the things we are looking at is cultural diplomacy, because when you talk about cultural diplomacy, it actually encourages positivity in a very fraught and intense world that we're facing right now. We're going through the COVID-19 pandemic, and cultural diplomacy is actually very underestimated. We practice this every day, even among our colleagues, among our friends, but very few realize the importance and its huge role in creating harmonious relations with people. So what is the way forward when it comes to cultural diplomacy? Let me just run through some of the basics of cultural diplomacy, yeah? Cultural diplomacy is critical to fostering peace and stability throughout the world. This was actually said by the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy, and the principles of this are respect and recognition of cultural diversity and heritage, global intercultural dialogue, justice, equality and interdependence, the protection of international human rights, global peace and stability. Many people think when it comes to diplomacy, it's about international relations between this company and organization, this country and another country, or many countries. But actually, diplomacy has many aspects. One of them would be, as I said earlier, cultural diplomacy, which has many aspects also, a lot of subsets. One is gastro-diplomacy, where you use food to encourage goodness and kindness between societies. There's also healing arts, which actually is coming up more and more now. A lot of people are turning to Malaysian herbs and healing practices for the Western world. So when you have this kind of interactions, you realize that this is just more than just about trade, politics, arguments between countries. It's about finding and sharing same values. So there are three pillars to cultural diplomacy. One would be values, one would be sharing, one would be cooperation. I mentioned earlier about how healing arts can be part of cultural diplomacy. So for example, let's look at traditional Chinese medicine, traditional Malay medicine. Did you know now that the Western world is looking and encouraging and actually implementing traditional Chinese medicine in their hospitals? People now, and I know of one Malaysian company that has actually got the FDA for Kacip Fatimah. So this interaction among pharmaceutical companies, researchers, doctors, it's not just about a plant, about acupuncture or reflexology. You're also sharing shared values. My country believes in healing for the well-being of society, and another country says, can we also have that so that our people are as healthy, are as happy as yours? So to do this, you have to share your knowledge, and to make sure it gets to a different plane, you need to cooperate with each other. You cannot enter any negotiation with guns blazing. You have to go into that spacing. We are going to find a solution together. We may not understand each other, but let's learn for the next 1 week, 1 month, 6 years on how we can collaborate. And that is cultural diplomacy. It's about collaborating between cultures, different societies, different countries, different governments, organizations. And really that is that. Now, how can we utilize cultural diplomacy to strengthen ties between Malaysia and other countries in the future? How do we develop arts development in our country and any other country, right? Now, this is just beyond, not just about sharing cultures, the arts and so forth. I'll be giving you some steps as to how to promote these. 1, we should have culture and country exchanges using academia or intellectual fellowships. I'll give you 2 scholarships, fellowships that I was very privileged to be part of. I was the Asian Public Intellectual Fellow This no longer exists, but it was running in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia for about 12 years, and it was founded by the Nippon Foundation of Japan. What it does is, in each participating country, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, and so forth, they get 5 to 8 scholars from each country. So I was one of the 8 scholars. I went to Indonesia. Another friend of mine went to the Philippines. And you spend 3 months, 1 year, fully funded, and you must understand and study cultural aspect. So for me, I did a study on an Arab family in Malaysia, and I also studied the Arab family in Indonesia. What do they believe in? How were their lives like? How did they come to Malaysia or Indonesia? And after 1 year, you have a conference and exchange your ideas. I had a Japanese friend. He went to Bali. He was a percussionist. He said, oh, in Japan, I learned this. I'm an artist. I do this. This is our traditional performance instrument. In Bali, I want to learn the dance, the Baroque dance, you know. How can I incorporate this in Japan? And how can my performance be incorporated in traditional Japanese Balinese performance? So that was one. And it was very good because it wasn't just 2 countries. Because it was funded and founded by the Nippon Foundation, they also got an insight on how, Asians, ASEAN scholars think. And what was fascinating was the researchers that got the scholarship fellowship were not just academics. Some were artists, some were journalists, some was just a professional. We met someone who was a PTD and said, I want 1 year to study a different culture, and he did it, and we had a lot of fun. So that was one. Unfortunately, it no longer exists. The other one is the Chevron Scholarship. This is very academic. It's for masters and PhD. But should you be lucky to get that scholarship, it's not about going to England and then study and get straight A's. You have to get to know people from other cultures, and you have to, as a representative of Malaysia, share what Malaysia is about. So it was very fascinating. Malaysian students going out to meet non-Malaysian students. This is our food. This is my tradition. This is how I pray. When you have this kind of exchanges, these are the things that may happen, right? 1, original, innovative research, inspired and shared by participating countries. This is something we must encourage. Now everyone's very modern. Everything is Dr. Google, Mr. Google. But it only comes to a certain level. I think face-to-face interactions, friendships, exchanges of ideas, whether you agree or not, are actually very helpful for us to learn about each other. We know many Malaysian scholars who go to other countries who study things like performing arts, and even about food, and you realize this goes so far. People realize Malaysia or another country is not just about their trees, about their their culture or their language. There's a lot more to that. Cultural exchanges actually help you share values of a country and yourself with other people. This is very, very important. The internet and budget airlines, so I don't know whether they still exist during COVID, while it has democratized many exchanges, we still don't really know a lot about each other. We still fight on Facebook, we still argue. And this is not healthy for a country. It's not healthy for anyone to have that kind of negativity. So we must pursue this. We must share our values. Friendships and networks are made and maintained. I think in the time of internet, friendships and networks is very touch and go. Hello, goodbye, on Twitter, on Facebook. But you don't meet these friends. Cultural diplomacy actually forces you to get out from the social media, internet world to say, okay, I have to engage with a country or organization or a person of a different culture from mine. I better have, all the goods on hand. We need this. Real life insight on different cultural mores. I'll give you one example. Many years ago, I was based in Sarawak. I wanted to study how the indigenous people, the orang asal of Sarawak, practice their religious faith, and their rituals. They were very respectful. They asked me, kamu orang Melayu, Islam? And I said, yes. Okay. They went to the market to get halal chicken. So I thought, wow, this is so wonderful. And we spent one night talking. I said, okay, why do you eat halal ayam? Halal chicken. And I said, okay. And I said, why do you slaughter, wild boars for your rituals? And it was very fascinating. But having that sharing, at the end of it, everyone said, this person said to me, at the end of the day, kami bertuhan. And I thought that was a very, very beautiful way of learning about each other's culture. We actually have many things in common. Just that we have to be a bit brave lah. I stayed for 10 days in a rumah panjang. I had many adventures. I almost fell down from a tree. But I thought, this is one way to learn about my own countrymen. And I will never, never give that kind of experience up. It's fantastic. It also, cultural diplomacy, through country exchanges, through fellowships, intellectual exchanges, actually fosters leadership skills. When you are out there in a very uncomfortable environment, because it's not something very similar, not familiar, right? You have no choice but to stand there, okay, I got to be very strong and brave here. I have to stand my ground. Now, what do I do? So, it fosters leadership skills. It also makes you think. You have to be critical. It makes you think on the spot. Oh dear, I'm in a certain situation. I don't want to offend my new friends. What do I do? So cultural exchanges like this are very important for every nation. Malaysian scholars, for example, are very highly regarded overseas because not just through their work ethics, but also through their ideas. We may be shy, but once you get us going and talking, you realize that we have a wealth of knowledge to share. So we should encourage this. Education is very, very important. You don't have to have a PhD, you don't have to have a degree, but you must always, always learn. You must always seek knowledge. Next would be cultural diplomacy missions. I had mentioned before about the British Council, Goethe Institute, the Japan Foundation, and how these were all created after the Cold War when the United States decided we have to use arts, culture, education, music, you name it, to counter communism. So now you see many, many countries having their own missions, and they are like in other countries. They work and employ locals. When they do this, at work itself, they learn from the locals, and the locals also learn from their foreign colleagues. And they go out there to work with communities, local communities. Let me give you an example, of the Japan Foundation, Kuala Lumpur, right? Not only do they facilitate cultural, educational, and language exchanges between their countries and Malaysia, they organize film festivals, art exhibitions, and work with local artisans. For example, the Japan Foundation Kuala Lumpur's From Seed to Textile is the third phase in a 5-year research-based project aimed at rediscovering and documenting natural dye practices in Malaysian batik making. This phase explores the use of natural indigo in batik dyeing. The Japan Foundation is very well known in Terengganu, not only because in the 1980s, we had cultural exchanges and, now you know my age, but at that time, the Japanese government did a cultural exchange. In Form 4 and Form 5, you had to learn either Japanese or Arabic or French, And after that, many of them who took up Japanese went on to Japanese universities and they came back to teach. I don't know whether they still have that program, but we had Japanese teachers, we sang Japanese songs. I'm not very good at language, but I thought this is fun. And they also have a long history with Terengganu. So the Japanese presence is always there, working with local artisans, and they bring their own researchers to Terengganu and so forth, where Japanese researchers learn about craft making, how to do our brassware, and how to do batik. This is extremely important. You just don't know how far you can reach, yeah? Next one would be the Goethe Institute, which is a Federal Republic of Germany's cultural institute active worldwide. They promote the study of German abroad and encourage international cultural exchange. Right now, I know it's a small project, but they're working on peace education, where they're translating German books into Bahasa Malaysia and Arabic about different cultures, about what it means to be Muslim, what it means to be a refugee, what it means to be poor. So I don't think the project has come out yet, but it's a very interesting project that I saw and I thought, this is wonderful because the books may be written by Germans, but it's about different cultures and in local languages. And this, I think, will contribute to the literacy of a country and also understanding a different person's culture and heritage. I think, and I would like to encourage everyone, we should empower ourselves by creating new networks which also benefit the current groups. Let me give you some examples. So at the status quo, here we are. So I think we should work with civil society organizations or NGOs. They work on the ground, they understand the sentiments on the ground, and they have many things that they want to share. One way is through food. Through food exchanges, and this is something which happens in New York, they have international students bringing one food from their own culture. It's become very popular and people start eating. I think it's called Foods of the Nations. I'm not sure about the title, but people enjoy it. Students enjoy that, yeah? Now, we should have informal cultural groups. Sometimes we rely too much on the establishment or established organizations. If we can just create little groups among ourselves and touch base with cultural missions, right? Or even academics, I think we can do a lot of things. I mentioned earlier how we should deal with academia and, intellectual fellowships. I think that has not been tapped enough. Our local universities have many professors and students who do and actually study on culture. We just have to be a little bit more hardworking to find out who these people are. But they do very fascinating work, and everyone says there's always the funding issue. If we work with local universities, maybe we won't get millions, but if we work together, there's a small budget, you can create little projects here. And because they also have the network overseas. So there you can see how cultural diplomacy can be achieved. Lastly, now, people, when they think about embassies, they always think, okay, this is about government-to-government interaction. No, reach out to the political section or the PR section of the embassy, whether it's the US Embassy, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the British High Commission, the EU mission. There's always a segment that focuses on what you call that, on culture, on cultural diplomacy. Reach out, get to know them. They're very friendly and they also want to learn about you. So have a teh tarik and say, look, let's not meet in a cafe, let's meet in a warung. This is teh tarik and let's talk about our two countries. So don't underestimate. Another foreign organization which I think, again, is it's not being used in a more positive way is, we're looking at chambers of commerce, like the American Chambers of Commerce, the British Chamber of Commerce, the EU Mission of Trade, etc. People think, oh, this is all about business. No, you should not look at that. Reach out to them because they work with companies from their countries who have invested in Malaysia. And you might actually get some funding to do a CSR project. They say, look, we want to do this. How do we do this? Can we work together with this company, a German company, an American company? And that is one way to reach out and actually explore cultural diplomacy together. It's not necessarily with governments. It can even be with a company. So this leads on to the next one, right? I personally am a great believer in public-private partnerships. What is a public-private partnership? public-private partnership is basically working with the corporate sector together with government agencies, NGOs, or people who are not part of the private sector. Now, certain things we can look at. There are trade shows that we can work together with. There are cultural shows. There are conferences. So if we look at transportation companies, for example, Air Asia, and they have a foundation, right? Approach them and say, look, can we do this thing? Can we work together so that we can do some exchanges between a certain destination that Air Asia flies to and Malaysia? That is just one example. Another one is we can look at CSR projects. A lot of people think CSR projects is planting trees, donating to orphans. Be creative. Do something a little bit more than just, the normal stuff. Another one is, I think private companies always look at the bottom dollar. Is this going to make me money or not make me money? But tell them, look, do you know cultural diplomacy? If you invest in this project with us, it actually increases your profit because it shows you believe in diversity, you believe in sharing knowledge with each other. And the fact that you are, let's say the logo of the company, right? When people look at that, they say, wow, they are very, very progressive. They are very good. They support certain things. So don't look at companies as, they're capitalistic. Work with them, talk to them, and befriend them. I've spoken quite a bit today about cultural diplomacy. I feel we haven't explored enough about cultural diplomacy. We can do so much more. We just need to be creative. I think also we need to be targeted in how we approach because there's so much to do. I've given you tips on how we should approach certain organizations like the embassies, trade chambers of commerce, NGOs. There's a lot to do, but the world, while it may be small, is actually very, very big. And I think we should invest in cultural diplomacy to learn about each other so that the world is safe and secure and we all live happily ever after.